US President Donald Trump has confirmed that his special envoy, Steve Witkoff, will travel to Moscow next week in an attempt to finalize a peace deal aimed at ending the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. The announcement comes as the situation in Ukraine remains dire, with continued military clashes and growing international concerns over the war's impact on regional and global security. The Kremlin officially confirmed the planned visit, with Russian President Vladimir Putin expected to meet Witkoff to discuss the details of the peace proposal. Witkoff's visit, scheduled for next week, is seen as a crucial diplomatic step in the ongoing efforts to bring the conflict to a resolution. The US delegation will focus on negotiating key points of disagreement between the US and Russia, while also ensuring Ukraine's interests are adequately represented. In a statement aboard Air Force One, President Trump provided additional details about the mission. They're talking to Russia now. Steve Witkoff is going over, maybe with Jared Kushner. I'm not sure about Jared going, but he's involved in the process. Smart guy. And they're going to be meeting with President Putin, I believe, next week in Moscow, Trump said, signaling his support for Witkoff's efforts to engage with the Russian leadership. Trump's comments suggest that Jared Kushner, his son-in-law and former senior advisor, may also be involved in the discussions, although Trump made it clear that Kushner's participation had not yet been confirmed. Regardless, the delegation's goal will be to hold high-level talks with the Russian president and push forward with the peace process. The planned trip comes on the heels of a controversial episode in which a leaked phone call reportedly featured Steve Witkoff offering advice to a Putin aide on how to approach Republican officials regarding the Ukraine conflict. While the conversation raised concerns among some observers, Trump defended Witkoff's actions, calling them a standard form of negotiation and asserting that such discussions are common in diplomatic processes. Trump stated that he had not personally listened to the phone call, but stressed that the exchange was simply part of the negotiation tactics often employed during international diplomacy. The US administration has been under scrutiny over its evolving position on the war in Ukraine. Initially, Washington's peace proposal was seen as overly favorable to Russia, drawing sharp criticism from Ukraine and its allies. In response to these concerns, the Trump administration revised its approach. The new framework, according to the president, better takes into account Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, a move aimed at addressing the objections raised by Kyiv and other Western capitals. The proposed peace plan is now under negotiation, with the US seeking to strike a balance between securing Russian cooperation and ensuring that Ukraine's interests are protected. The revised proposal is expected to be a central topic of discussion during Witkoff's visit to Moscow next week, though the details of the revised plan have not been publicly released. The decision to send Witkoff to Moscow has drawn both praise and criticism. Supporters of the move argue that it represents a necessary diplomatic effort to de-escalate the conflict and prevent further loss of life. By engaging directly with Russian leadership, they say, the US has the opportunity to secure a breakthrough in the peace process and bring the war to a close. Critics, however, have expressed concerns about the potential for the US to compromise too much in the negotiations, especially given the past history of Russian aggression in Ukraine. They worry that any peace deal that heavily favors Russia could undermine Ukraine's sovereignty and embolden further territorial expansion by Moscow. In the context of these concerns, the US has repeatedly assured its allies that Ukraine's interests will remain a priority in the negotiations. The US administration has also stressed that the ultimate goal of the peace talks is to reach a solution that upholds Ukraine's territorial integrity while also addressing Russia's security concerns. The peace process itself has faced numerous challenges, including entrenched positions on both sides. Moscow's insistence on territorial concessions, particularly in eastern Ukraine and Crimea, has been a major stumbling block. For its part, Ukraine has steadfastly rejected any arrangement that would involve giving up territory or accepting a diminished role in the international community. Despite these differences, the US has continued to push for a diplomatic solution, believing that a negotiated settlement remains the best way to ensure long-term stability in the region. Ukraine, he's got to sell Ukraine to Russia. That's what a deal maker does. You've got to say, look, they want this. You've got to convince them with this. That's a very standard form of negotiation, Trump explained, reiterating the importance of finding common ground in order to end the conflict. The diplomatic mission also comes at a time of increasing tension between the US and Russia over other issues. including arms control and cybersecurity. These broader geopolitical concerns add complexity to the peace talks as both sides attempt to navigate the delicate balance between addressing immediate concerns about Ukraine and managing long-term strategic interests. The US delegation's efforts to negotiate a peace deal have been complicated further by internal political divisions. Within the US, there is significant debate over the best approach to resolving the conflict. Some lawmakers and foreign policy experts advocate for a more aggressive stance toward Russia, arguing that the US should use its leverage to pressure Moscow into making greater concessions. Others believe that a more diplomatic approach, such as the one being pursued by Witkoff, is necessary to bring about a lasting peace. The involvement of high-level figures like Witkoff and Kushner also highlights the importance of the peace talks to the Trump administration. Both men have been deeply involved in US foreign policy and have played key roles in diplomatic negotiations in the past. Kushner, in particular, was involved in brokering the Abraham Accords, a series of normalization agreements between Israel and several Arab nations. As the US envoy prepares for his visit to Moscow, the outcome of these talks remains uncertain. What is clear, however, is that the stakes are high. The conflict in Ukraine has already resulted in significant loss of life and displacement, and the international community remains deeply concerned about the potential for further escalation. The peace talks in Moscow next week represent an opportunity for the US to play a pivotal role in bringing the war to a close. However, the complexities of the negotiations, coupled with the divergent interests of the parties involved, mean that the road to peace will be anything but straightforward. As Witkoff travels to Moscow, the international community will be watching closely, hoping for a breakthrough that could finally bring an end to one of the most devastating conflicts of the 21st century. However, with entrenched positions on both sides and ongoing political turmoil, the prospects for a swift resolution remain unclear. The final outcome of the peace process will depend not only on the diplomatic efforts of the US envoy, but also on the willingness of Russia and Ukraine to compromise. In the coming days, all eyes will be on Moscow as negotiations continue to unfold and the world waits to see whether a peace deal can be reached. In the meantime, the humanitarian toll of the conflict continues to mount, with millions of Ukrainians displaced and thousands more affected by the violence. The international community's hopes for peace rest on the success of these talks, and the next steps in the diplomatic process will be critical in determining the future of Ukraine and its people. As of now, the peace process remains ongoing, with the potential for a resolution still in play. But with tensions running high and no guarantee of success, the world will wait to see what comes next.